Hi, everyone. So as Stephen said, I'm very happy to be here today. I'm Cristina Cordova, and I lead the partnerships team at Stripe. So today I'll be sharing some general lessons on building partnerships at an organization like Stripe. I started at Stripe when we were about 25 employees. We're now 650 plus, and we've had a lot of growth at that time, and what a partnership was to us at 25 people may look very different to a partnership today. So I'll kind of go through that. So let's start off with kind of an overview of what we'll be talking about today. So first, we'll be discussing generally partnerships at Stripe. What does a partnership mean to us at Stripe? Two, what are partnerships more broadly? So how can you take maybe what partnerships at Stripe is to your organization more broadly? And then two, why do they actually matter? Why does it make sense to go and do partnerships? And then last but not least, I'll talk through some lessons in building partnerships that I have learned both in my time at Stripe and prior to Stripe as well. So first off, for those of you that don't know Stripe, as Stephen said, maybe you've been living under a rock, but I understand not everyone is familiar with us. But ultimately, we're a software platform for building and running an internet business. So hundreds of thousands of businesses ranging from startups to Fortune 500 companies rely on Stripe's technology to both accept payments, run recurring revenue transactions, create marketplaces, and really ultimately define new revenue streams. So we work with partners around the world to kind of abstract away a lot of that complexity, right? So we started out as an API. That's what Stripe is probably best known for, which really gave us the tools to begin executing on partnerships from a very early stage at 25 people, which is when I joined Stripe. So in building our partnerships, I'd like to kind of talk about some of the models that we use to figure out what partnerships matter at different stages of time at Stripe. So in building our partnership strategy, we really started with our foundation, which is this core. It's a product that ultimately is delivering payment services to our customers at the end of the day. So when we think about Stripe, we really look at what do we need Stripe to do and able to work. So that really brings us to a lot of product and financial partners that enable us to actually, for example, move money. So we look at Wells Fargo and Silicon Valley Bank as partners that enable us to actually accept payments on behalf of customers and then pay them out to our merchants. We work very closely with card networks like Visa, MasterCard, and Amex, again, because we couldn't necessarily move money on our own. And these were really our foundational product and financial partnerships that we could not function without. So not everyone needs partnerships before they can launch a product, but in Stripe's case, we needed to work with all of these players just to launch Stripe's product from the get-go. Then once we started to work with effectively mobile wallets like Apple and Google's Android Pay, we wanted to enable our users to effectively build better experiences for their customers. So there's generally this kind of challenge in accepting payments on a mobile device that you effectively are trying to input all this information. You might have a credit card in the other hand. It's quite difficult. How can we work with partners to enable a better product experience at the end of the day? Apple, Google, Samsung, and a few others are partners in this space for us and have really helped enable us grow and enable better conversion rates on mobile devices, which helps our customers make more money at the end of the day. So after our core product, where we have the financial and product partners in place to actually offer Stripe to a business that wants to accept payments, we needed to really grow our user base significantly. So most businesses do this by hiring a lot of salespeople at a very early stage and giving them targets to go out and sell businesses. At our early stage of Stripe, we really thought that ultimately our core customer was the developer, and the developer could go and tell other friends about their experience with Stripe, and that experience was generally quite positive. So we got a significant amount of uptick in direct users from word of mouth. But we also grew significantly in the early days through our distribution partnerships. So we ultimately partnered with companies like Shopify, for example, that would integrate with our partner APIs and offer all of their users the ability to sign up for a Stripe account and begin accepting payments. So as an example, we could either go and sell Sally's t-shirt shop on using Stripe, or we could partner with Shopify, which has tens of thousands of Sally's t-shirt shops, and get all of those users in one fell swoop. So it was a very significant contributor to our overall growth. If you look at some of our partners here, it's everything from Shopify to enterprise companies like SAP, Squarespace, and then some of our social commerce partners like Pinterest, Facebook, and Twitter that enable you to sell products through other channels outside of your core website. So last but not least, as a business with a Stripe account, you likely work with a variety of different services to run your business. So you're accepting payments with Stripe. Now maybe you need to start thinking about how are you going to do revenue recognition or account for those payments, or do things like business intelligence, analytics, other kind of data analysis tools to ultimately ensure that you're building the right product for your customers and that you're driving more customers to your product. It's really crucial for us that these services at the end of the day work very seamlessly with Stripe so that we can ensure that our users have a good product experience, not just by working with Stripe directly, but with working with all of the different services that also work with Stripe. So as an example, we launched this effectively works with Stripe ecosystem page, which enables you as a business to see all the different services that work very seamlessly with Stripe. Control is right here. Catherine, CEO Control, is right in our audience. In a lot of ways, we look at our partners as partners that can really build more functionality on top of Stripe than we're able to do directly, right? And when a particular customer comes to the Stripe ecosystem and they're saying, hey, I need revenue recognition, or I need billing, or I need analytics, we can come to the conclusion that we're not going to do all of that ourselves, but we're going to work with a partner ecosystem that can enable it. So I guess the big question is, does every company need partnerships? So while this strategy works really well for Stripe so far, it's not necessarily the right approach for every company out there. Not every company needs partnerships or can build partnerships that have a significant amount of impact in terms of revenue or user growth. So as an example, I still find this kind of quote from Paul Graham really great. For startups, the default answer to biz dev deals should be no. They almost never turn out to be worth the distraction. So I find this funny because in many ways I think it's true, and yet I joined a YC startup at 25 people doing exactly what Paul Graham said was a total distraction. So I want to get down to the nitty-gritty in terms of what you can do to build partnerships that are ultimately successful and don't become this distraction ultimately for your company. So let's go into a little bit of what partnerships are, because I think when we say partnerships or we say BD, ultimately we're all kind of talking about different things, and I want to get us together in terms of using the right language. So there we go. Ultimately, partnerships should be mutually beneficial. For example, we've had a number of partners come to Stripe and ask for something when ultimately we're not getting anything in return. Those partnerships are quite difficult to close, and I think in a lot of ways they don't resonate with being a true partnership to me in my mind. Next, they have to be collaborative. So ultimately, you and your partner have to work together to come up with the right solution. If you're just demanding something, it's not necessarily a true partnership in my mind. Often, partnerships should have never been done before in the history of your company. So as an example, it's really crucial to think that people in partnerships can understand both the core business today and where the business is going, because it's likely that you're going to be proposing partnerships that are really going to be a great thing for the company a year from now or 2 years from now, but maybe not be a priority today. And last but not least, partnerships really have to drive business goals. So I think there's this kind of joke about how BD people are effectively salespeople without a quota. Not really how I look at partnerships. So at the end of the day, you have to look at what are you driving? for the business, right? It may be any one of these three things. It could be user growth, which hopefully then equates to revenue growth. It could be sales enablement. You could be opening up new opportunities, channels for your sales team to sell through, or it could be enhanced product functionality, right? If you are a company like Dropbox, you may want to have a really great integration with Google Docs so that your experience is seamless and offers a better product experience for your customers. So what are partnerships not? Direct sales. So if you are just doing sales, you are selling a customer on what is currently on the truck today. You have a product that is ready to go, you're selling that customer, it's sales. If you're doing partnerships, generally what you're doing is you're selling what's on the truck a year from now, right? So maybe you're going out there and you're selling a product that doesn't actually exist yet. So I've gone into rooms and I've said, oh, like, what about this API that like effectively push data from this source to this source? Like, wouldn't that be great? And the partner goes like, yeah, that'd be awesome. Like, is that something that you have? And I say, no, but it's something we can do, right? It's something we can build. So ultimately you're selling something that doesn't yet exist. You're not selling a bunch of things that are already on the truck today. One-sided. Kind of mentioned this earlier. It's generally not a great idea to do a one-sided partnership, especially because when you get everything and your partner gets nothing, don't be surprised when something goes wrong down the road. They partner with someone else who is able to offer something in return, or that partner doesn't dedicate the resources that you need to get up and running. So now, and then last but not least, logos and surface level partnerships. So that's kind of what I call the press release partnership. You see this a lot with like enterprise companies where like enterprise company X partners with enterprise company Y, but ultimately they're not really doing anything together. There's no technical integration. They're just like putting each other's logos on each other's website and claiming that they work together, but there's not really a whole lot there. This can be nice if you especially need press, but ultimately if you're going to spend a lot of time doing BD and partnerships, I would not spend your time in that area. So, partnerships lessons. I'll go through a few lessons here in building partnerships from my time at Stripe, starting off with the context of who you're working with on the other side. So, one, you want to know who you're dealing with. So, who are the decision makers on the other side? That requires you to know how another organization works, probably just as well as you know how your organization works. So, who will your advocates be at the end of the day? For Stripe's product, we are a very developer-driven company. Our advocates on the other side with our partners tend to be the product and engineering teams. Those are the teams that we tend to do quite well with because they understand the value add of Stripe. And so when we walk into a room and we're pitching, I'm pitching to that person, the product person and the engineering person, even if the BD person is the person who brought me into that room. So ultimately, sell to your advocates first. And then make sure that you have something else to offer for everyone else in the room, even though they may not be your strongest advocate. Second, understand what your partners care about. You'd be surprised at how many companies miss this. When I think about working with a partner for the very first time, I ask them a fair bit of, what are they working on day to day? What do they do outside of the partnership context in which I'm working with them? What are their goals? Again, not specific to the partnership that I am potentially working on with them. That way, when I get into my pitch of what I think we should be working on with that company, I can tweak that pitch to what's important to that company. So what you never want to do is just kind of give the same pitch over and over and over again, because that might not be the most effective way to land that partnership. At the end of the day, I always think about it in the context of how can I make my partner look really good to their boss, right? So they can go back to their boss and say, yeah, I closed that deal with Stripe. It's so great. It's the perfect company to be working with, and it's going to get us X, Y, and Z, which are goals for our company. Next, build the right product for the right partner. So many partnerships are ultimately not built for scale. When Stripe started working with Apple on Apple Pay, we didn't know what the product was going to be called. We didn't know a whole lot about the company and the product at all. That's pretty typical with Apple. They're quite secretive. I think in a lot of ways, we didn't really build a partnership model from the outset that was going to be repeatable. We had to build the right product for the right partner. So that last part is really key. We didn't, for example, go waste our time with some fourth tier random phone manufacturer. We said that if we're going to do this right, we're going to do it really well, we're going to do it with a partner that's the best in the space. For us, that means Apple, Google, et cetera. And that meant that we built a partnership that enabled, effectively, on the App Store at launch for Apple Pay, over half the apps being powered by Stripe, right? We thought about things that we could do to enable that to happen so that ultimately Stripe is more important to Apple because that's a strategic goal of ours. One of the things that we thought about was how can you as a business, for example, quickly and easily integrate Stripe? We thought back really to the early days of Stripe. There's something called the call us and install, which is when our two founders go around and if you're having trouble integrating Stripe, they would just take your laptop. Let's say this is like a 10-person startup. They'll just take your laptop and they'll say, I can do that integration really quickly. They basically do the Stripe integration for a user. I think in a lot of ways we thought about how can we do something similar for Apple Pay to enable Apple Pay to take off. So we invited basically 10 of our top mobile customers into the Stripe office and put them side by side, one of our partner engineers, so that that engineer could help them build that integration and build a really great experience from day one so that they could get featured in the App Store, which was something that that user wanted. And then two, build a really great product experience for Apple Pay, which was something that Apple wanted. So how can we think about building effectively non-scalable experiences for the right partner when we think it's truly necessary? Next, prioritize your asks. So ultimately the greatest killer of deals is time. It's more productive and efficient to get what you want if you prioritize the things that matter to you and make sure that the partner is aware of those things in advance. So you should really be explicit about them. You should know what your limits are in terms of a partnership that you're thinking about closing. And make sure that if you're negotiating, you're not necessarily negotiating line by line, but you're negotiating what really matters to you. Maybe it's these 3 things. And that way, if you walk out of this room and you get those 3 things, the partner can get something else, but you got what you really wanted at the end of the day. And you didn't have to waste so many cycles with legal, with the other BD person to really get to the final conclusion of what you want, where you wanted to be. Introduce the bench. So if you're a later stage company, introduce your partners to the entire team of people on your side that are going to be working on that particular deal and supporting that partnership effort. So this may include product, engineering, finance, depending on where you sit in the space. In many cases with strategic partnerships, the other side really wants to know what commitments are you making to the partnership, and the people in that room can really tell you a lot of things about who really cares about this partnership, who's involved, and who's top of mind. It's also really important to introduce your partners, your exec team to your partner's exec team at some point early in the deal. This can really help manage any road bumps that come up. So for example, if something with a deal is not going quite well and we're 3 months in, I can go to my CEO and say, hey, I think you need to have a conversation with the partner CEO. That way we can figure out what the solution to this problem might actually be. And that way you can really avoid issues with partners down the road. So building those relationships early is quite important. At the same time, if you're a very small company, let's say it's growing fast, you have 100 different things on your plate, it's also important to shield the bench. So there's a lot of stuff kind of constantly being hurled at any given team. And it's really important for the BD person, the person who's doing partnerships, to really shield the people on their team and protect product and engineering specifically, because as we all know, that's probably our scarcest resource, from getting distracted, right? So how can we ensure that product and engineering are building rather than in 10 useless meetings at any given day? So make sure that you're that person from a partnerships perspective who knows the product well enough to be able to articulate what you need in a meeting, and 2, that you're able to keep non-essential folks out of the conversation so that you can get more done. Next, and last but not least, I would say set your metrics for success in advance. So setting expectations with partners is very crucial. If you expect a partnership that you're landing to lead to 10,000 new users, say so. at the beginning and make sure that your partner is aware of that metric of success. And that they know that before the deal is actually completed. So this really helps avoid headaches and issues down the line when the partner said, oh, well, I thought we were going for X and you really wanted Y, right? You know in advance exactly kind of what both sides are going after. And this helps you ultimately make plans for the longer term so that you're thinking beyond just the context of this one deal that you're trying to close. So just going over those one more time, in terms of partnerships lessons, 1, know who you're dealing with. 2, understand what your partners care about. 3, build the right product for the right partner. 4, prioritize your asks. 5, introduce the bench. 6, but also shield the bench. 7, set your metrics for success in advance. Thanks for your time, and I guess I'll open it up to any questions that you all might have.
Scott.
Hey, Christina, thanks for that.
Hey, sure.
So 2 related questions around kind of those core product partners, the financial partners. So in the first hand, how did you guys approach the banks and et cetera when you didn't have a product yet and presumably didn't have a lot of value to offer to them in the form of partnership? And then related, now that you're well established and you're still resting upon those partnerships, how do you protect yourselves from things going awry with those deals?
Sure. I would say certainly having great investors helps. People who can ultimately introduce you to the right folks at some of these companies are very, very helpful. Even having, if you don't have the right investors who can make these connections for you, even having the right legal team. There were some folks from that we used on the legal side as effectively, kind of contracted legal help that kind of came on board, helped us with a couple of these early deals, and actually, because they had operated in the financial space, knew the right players on the other side based on some of their work with their other clients. So that's something where you can potentially hack it together. In terms of longer term, what you might want to do with some of these partnerships and making sure that they don't go awry. Certainly setting up contacts in advance is really helpful. So with Wells Fargo and Silicon Valley Bank, right, we're thinking about how can we bring their services to the next business that's coming about today, right? Where you may not, as a global internet entrepreneur, decide to walk on down to your Wells Fargo branch and open up a bank account, you're more likely to potentially go to Stripe, right? And so we look at it as how can we offer that as a distribution opportunity for a Wells Fargo or for a Silicon Valley Bank. And I think strategically, they were very much aligned to that. So speak to something, an audience in our case, developers, that is not their core audience, and see how can we make this an opportunity that gives them something better than what they're ultimately able to achieve on their own. And then you have to start thinking about new opportunities that make a lot of sense for them over time, right? So you don't want to just kind of rest on your laurels with the partnership that's gone well. So recently we just launched a partnership with MasterCard that effectively enables MasterCard to us to use MasterCard rails to send instant payouts to some of our merchants. So as an example, if you're a Lyft driver, you have racked up $50 today and giving out a bunch of rides, you need that $50 now. You don't want to wait 2 days for that $50 to hit you via ACH into your bank account. You can actually get that payment right away. And it'll go straight to your debit card and you can begin spending it, right? So that's a product experience where we're able to leverage new technology from a financial partner like MasterCard, and then we're able to charge more for a product because it has more value. So it gets both sides ultimately more at the end of the day.
Hi, I'm Fred with BizWatt, and I've got a question on if you get a strategic partnership with somebody who you've identified as a potential acquirer, does that change the nature of how you should approach the partnership with the eye on being acquired, or any pitfalls there, any experience with that kind of thing?
Sure. I mean, I'll say in my history at Stripe, we've never gotten into kind of conversations where we're looking to get acquired. They're definitely we're definitely on the path of effectively being a standalone company, but there are definitely conversations that we've been in with some companies where they're building a really interesting product. We could do a product partnership with them potentially, or we could potentially acquire that company and they could do what they're doing really well outside of Stripe, within Stripe. I think ultimately you have to look at it as what is the company thinking at the end of the day? Like if they're coming in and they want to do a product partnership, I don't think we generally say, oh, well, you should just come join us, right? We try to be, kind of upfront and honest with some of our general plans. So as an example, if a company came to us and they're doing something that ultimately we're planning on doing in 6 months, we'll be very upfront and honest and say, hey, like just so you know, like this is an area that we plan on getting into relatively soon. So I think it's about being open and honest with your partners, even in the cases where your partners might become companies that you acquire at the end of the day. But I think we're always open to those opportunities. It's just not something we lead with first.